being able to read the game wherever you are, because you're probably not going to understand half the time what the heck is happening because they're speaking another language. But if you can see the right things and you can make the right move, people are going to want to hire you.
All the professionals. Maybe one more. Probably does something we'll never really know. Okay, tallest podcast on earth. We're back. I'm so stoked. I took a little bit of a hiatus, but I'm stoked to have you, Jordan Larson, on here for so many reasons. The main thing I think of right off the bat is just local legend. You're just a legend. Like there's a few guys on the men's side, which obviously I'm a little more familiar with, like Matt Anderson, David Smith, guys who have been in and out of the gym for so long. And you're the first person I thought of when it comes to women's volleyball, of a girl who's played overseas for so long with the national team for so long. So I'm happy you're on here. I'm stoked. I got so much love for you and I got so many thoughts and questions. So thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
So first thing is like, just for those of you listening and wondering why there's been no episodes like all summer, I took some time off, and this is where I would love your thoughts on is like, you know, I've been doing the national team and playing overseas for like the past 7 years and had a handful of like injuries here and there, but more so just like for my mind and for my body, I was like, dang, I need time off. And when I see guys like Matt Anderson, David Smith, some of the other girls who have been doing this, like Kelsey, some girls who have been doing this for a long time. I just wonder like, how have you been doing this schedule where you go from more or less like October to April playing overseas, you come directly back with the national team and you do that for, 3, 4, 5 months. And then you go directly back overseas. Like how?
Yeah, looking back, it's like I don't know how I did it. I think in the moment I was just like, we just got to do it. Like if you wanted to be on the national team or you wanted to get decent contracts, it was like, hey, if you don't stay in it, like the next person was just going to come. And I think that's where I was always fearful of, is just I don't know if yes, I was talented, but I didn't have the ability to like truly, really, I think, step away fully and then be able to come. At least I didn't feel internally that I could do that and feel like I was at the same spot. And so I just felt like I had to keep going because I didn't want the next to come. And so
I have to interrupt you. I apologize. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense to me what you're saying.
Yeah.
But then you win a gold medal or you win a medal. And at that point, it's like, well, you've achieved it. You've won a medal. And yet you still come in the gym like feeling like you have to prove it still. So were there ever moments where you were like, actually, I'm pretty good. I think I like have set where like the marker of like how good I am as a player, they know me, the coaching staff knows me, like to take time? Or did you always feel this like external pressure that I have to show up and compete?
Yeah. To be honest, it probably sounds cliche, but I always felt that. And I always felt like I was never quite there. And I mean, I think even now, like, really taking a step back and not being so involved, obviously, with the national team day in and day out, I definitely feel this like level of being content of like, hey, like I've put in the work, I've done a lot of good things and like being okay in that space. But in general, like, I think I was always trying to push like this envelope of like, hey, I'm not there. I still have so much to learn. And I feel like as like the end of my career came, like I felt my body starting to go down a little bit. So then that's where like I felt like I really had to dig deep to kind of try to overcompensate for
what do you mean end of your career? What does that even mean?
As I've gotten older, like mid to late 30s, like I started to feel like I was like, every day you're kind of walking in and like you had the bad day, I just say bad days, the, medium days outweighed like the really high days, and those medium days, you're like, man, do I still got it? Like, can I still do this? Can I still hang? Like the doubt starts to creep in. And so it's like, trying to weigh reality versus like, where am I actually at, And so I think it's just, yeah.
I mean, there's like so many different directions to peel off of. And I guess I just think of like, I know in my experience when I first, and I'm curious from you, like at what point did you join the national team and like what was your status were you like you joined and you just were a part of the traveling team and hit it running? Because not a lot of players are that way, but some are. And you're
Yeah.
shaking your head, yes.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I was just saying, like, I agree with you. Like, not everybody gets that opportunity. And I was lucky that I came in at the same time as Hugh did. So Hugh started in '09 with our national team. And at that point, which you probably know, a lot of right after the Olympic Games, a lot of the main players kind of take the summer off, really.
Hmm.
So I came in that summer, and he basically took a really young crew, Grand Prix, and we didn't really have, we had an Orsaka at the end of that year. And he basically just took all of us and ran with it. And I think I started pretty much every single match like that summer,
So your
which
first
was,
summer in was just after the Olympics?
yes. So they had
Okay.
just finished Beijing in '08. And then I came in that first summer of '09. But I walked in the gym and he's like, hey, I don't even know how he worded it. Probably speak here, but he just said like, hey, you were good in college, but we're going to reteach you how to do everything. And I'm like, huh? What? Like, excuse me. So yeah, just like how to be more efficient with my movements, like relearn how to pass, like, and if you don't change, I mean, that was kind of the speech you gave all of us. If you don't change, like, then you're just not going to be on the team. And
I'm
so it's like,
I'm so curious, like where, first of all, that sounds like such a blanket statement. Like, hey, you're with us now, you will relearn everything. Like, what did that actually mean? Like, especially now that you've gone through it all, and you're so mature now,
yeah.
like looking back on it, like what actually changed? Was it more just like, hey, this is the system that we run over here? Or was it something physically where it's like, hey, we're going to break down how you're moving and passing the ball? And like, what was the change? Do you remember?
Yeah. And again, how I'm remembering it seems so dramatic, but it, like, in my
No,
mind, I
that's
was
the
like,
best
oh,
part.
yeah.
How you remember it is the only thing that
The
matters.
only
Okay.
thing, yeah. Yeah, so it was really just technique wise. Like, I needed to relearn, like, I was used to passing with my arms bent, like keeping a straight arm, platform. How I was approaching, like, doing more of a direct approach versus like, all right, we're shuffling as soon as we pass. Obviously, we're trying to run a quicker offense similar to like the men's side. And so kind of relearning how to just be more efficient with a lot of my movements. And then also like how I think about the game, right? Like, Hugh always talks about, like, there's ebb and flows of the match. And if you have like these, you got to see when the momentum's switching, like, hey, if the team can't side out, like, why are we missing a serve? Like, it's the dumbest thing ever. Like, they're
Mm.
struggling to side out, just keep the ball in play. Like, learning those kind of like quirks is
Corks
that even a
works.
word? Quirks works, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Nuances of the gameplay, and just really trying to dive in and be a learner. I mean, and just trying to embrace as much as we can. So
I It's so interesting because this summer, because I took some time off. For example, I went and watched on the men's side like Hawaii play in the semifinals of the big tournament. And I remember being in college just thinking, like, for me, my last specifically year, my last 2 years was like really dominant, like had a really dominant performance, felt very unstoppable. And I'm sure you felt the same way. And so I'm just so curious, like the point I'm trying to make is when I went and watched, I was like, wow, the game looks so slow. But I remember being in that moment thinking like, I'm so fast, this is happening so fast.
right.
So like what was that journey like for you when you step out of college? I'm more curious from the women's side. Like this is why I can't like this is why I'm stoked to talk to you, because I think there's like for me such a disconnect between like the men's and the women's game. While it is the same sport, they're played differently. And so I'm curious to like nitpick with you a little bit about like what do you see, and obviously like you've been in this long enough, there's like I'm sure so much that's changed, but like what stands out to you in terms of how the game's evolved from the women's side?
Yeah, yeah, very much like you and your experience. I feel like in college I was like, oh yeah, like I'm at the top of my game, like for sure. Like internationally, it's not that big of a jump, but man, it's a different reality, and the ball's coming a hell of a lot faster. And like just seeing the game, like being able to read certain situations, like I don't think like I really truly appreciated like how hard or how big of a jump it was. And then I think I don't remember your latter part of the question, but just like
Just what you've seen, like how you've seen the game evolve. Like I'll just a quick example, like on the
yep.
men's side, the game is so much faster now.
Hmm.
Also, like there's starting to be this evolution with like setter takes an easy free ball and the like back row comes and fakes attacks and sets it. Like some things are changing. And I'm just curious from you, like what jumps out? Like what was the most obvious change? Not just from like going from college to playing overseas, but also just through your career, like how have you seen the game evolved, either whether that's through the youth or even through playing at the highest level?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, the speed overall, we're running so much faster than we normally were. And then I think also incorporating a lot of more BIC than we were ever running before. Again, I think similar to the men's side.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're, at least what I remember Hugh kind of talking about, like, and Puerto Rico at the time was like running so fast that like literally the players could just like cut it off, you know. I think it's similar to kind of, I don't know if you've watched Canada lately on the men's side, like they're just running so fast.
Mm-hmm.
It's like at that point, like you're so shot committed that like you have your range of window, it starts kind of like, you know, like you don't have that much space. I mean, you have a lot of daylight, but it's like, you know, where I think it's like, how do we find that happy medium of like, hey, we can run fast, but I still have enough range and like space that I can see and hit with. So I think just having that awareness, but yeah, I would say those two things would be kind of the biggest thing. And then I do think on the women's side, we're still trying to, I don't know how it is really much on the men's side, but like creating an all around like volleyball player, you know, at least as an outside, like it's just really tough. And I think,
Wait. I have to interrupt you. You just said as an outside, it's really tough to be a complete volleyball player. Are you aware of the other positions? Because I'll tell you one of them. It's called middle blocker, and it's not even volleyball. So,
I mean, like we have to pass and do all that. I mean, you guys sometimes pass, but no, I think middle blockers, you guys are saints. Like, and like how hard you guys have to work.
No, you don't need to. There's no need to be humble on this podcast. Okay, we all know the truth. The reason you're an outside is you're probably the most coordinated woman who is like actually skillful at the game. We all get it. We know what's going on.
No, definitely not. We all love the middles. So, yeah, no, I think that, unfortunately, I think our college game like hinders the ability for a lot of all around players. Just with the amount of subs that we have is just, it just really hinders girls playing all the way around and kind of learning how the game like evolves. So I don't know if that's ever going to change, but I know that as girls come to the national team, it's quite a bit of a bigger transition because they got to play a lot more and do a lot more. So,
and where do you think, like, because so for example, like this summer I had the time to do clinics, and it was my first time in a long time like teaching the youth and trying to be like, these are the things we see at the highest level, but now how do I break them down so they're just these little tangible nuggets you can just dip in some sauce and eat them, you know? Like that was my big journey. And so I'm curious from you, like, well, what are your, and I assumed we'd get to this later, but you're coaching now, correct?
Yeah.
So now it's like your turn to figure out like, okay, how do you take these really high level concepts and find ways to start working on them and applying them to the women that you're coaching?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm lucky that I married former head coach, now associate head coach at Texas, where he has a lot of nuggets that I've been able to pick his brain and kind of how and why. And but I also think that like my skill level, like I think I touched on, like I'm talented, but I always had to rely on other factors, right? So like learning how to use my mind. I wasn't going to overpower people. So
can you break that down a little bit farther? Like, what do you mean you had to be more tactical? Like, obviously you're not the tallest girl. Yep. You jump pretty good, but let's say you don't have the highest vertical in the world. Like, where do you feel like you're just really crafty?
For sure. Yeah. And I found that like there's a lot of girls that jump a lot higher than I do, like hit a lot harder than I do. So how can I still kill a ball at a high rate? And then make sure that like I'm doing everything I can for the coaches to make it really hard for me to come off the court. And that's like being a good teammate, talking to my teammates, you know, how can I add value in other areas than just physicality? And so I think being able to kind of expand myself like that has taught me a little bit more of like, okay, what I need, and then how can I communicate with other girls that are maybe different than me and kind of coach them up a little bit, even though I'm playing alongside them. And so I think learning that as I've gone, and even I think I was a lot of times like leading by example, but then I had to learn how to lead more vocally as I got older, just because I wasn't able to perform like the highest level, consistently. And just like physically, right? And so how can I still do that? And so I think as the years have progressed, it's like learning like different ways to communicate things. And then, but in general, I think it's just mainly having a conversation, because everybody learns different, right? Like how you learn is much different than how I learn. And how can I get to know you and what really like makes sense to you. Because in my mind, I'd be like, hey, Taylor, what's going on? Like, I see, this is what I see, right? Like describing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is how I would do it. Now you like, let's have a conversation about it versus like, yo, man, like what you're doing is stupid. Like, let's not do that, you know?
Okay, I have to ask you. Oh, two things came to my mind. The first thing I wanted to know is, uh, do you think you were difficult to coach?
Um, I think at times, yes, because I think I ask a lot of questions, but not in like not trying to do something, more of I want to really understand what you're trying to say because I really want to know how I can best apply it versus like me questioning what your intentions are because I know the intentions were there. It was just like, hey, no, I just need more clarity and I need more comprehension around the idea so then I can fully like buy into it and then apply it, if that makes sense. But I think sometimes I could see how a coach would be like, well, what the hell? Why is she questioning me? You know, like,
Mm.
but in reality, it wasn't like in an attack way, or it was just, hey, I want to know why. Why are we doing this? Because like they're like to me, in order to understand the why, like allows me to be the best version of myself.
Well, first of all, I really empathize is not the right word, but I totally agree with you. I always felt the same way, and it's also just a part of myself is needing to know why, and that was a part of my evolution is like learning when to have that conversation with a coach.
Yeah.
It took me a long time, but I'm just, the other thing it makes me think about is, and it's so different with the national team and playing for like a new coach potentially every year, even though you played on some clubs for a handful of years in a row.
Yep.
Um, do you feel like, especially I'd like to know in the women's game, do you feel like you can be really vulnerable with your coaches?
Hmm.
And here's what I mean. Like in my experience from the men's side, and I feel this mainly with the experiences I've had overseas,
Hmm.
almost every year, I've been really lucky this last year, and a few years prior, but like most years it's guys talking shit in the locker room about how they hate the practice or the coach sucks or whatever, and it just starts from like day one and just it gets worse as the year progresses. Like,
Yep.
and I've never been like designated team captain on any of these teams, but I have always ended up being the mediator because I like to be someone who's like, I'm just honestly myself, and it's like, if we're as a team, like constantly talking shit about our coach, we need to have a conversation. But
Yep.
from my experience, most European guys just don't want to have that conversation, or most guys in general. And I'm so curious, like, what does that look like on the women's game? Have you experienced something similar?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm like you, like I think, and maybe that's just how we are raised, like in
That's
the
how we
States,
roll. You were
how
going to
we
say it.
roll. Yeah, how we roll in the States a little bit. It's more of like, hey, like if we don't agree with something, we're very open about having the conversation. There's a productive way of giving, constructive criticism and being able to like come to some sort of solution. So I've definitely had times overseas where I feel like, hey, I had one coach that like we didn't keep score and ran the same practice all
Oh, I've
season
been
long.
there. Been there.
Oh, whew, man, it is like, but now looking back, I'm like, okay, like the mental challenge that it takes to stay in that, like I'm grateful for that, right? Because it was like every day I had to set a goal myself. All right, like I have 10 passes, I got to get 8 out of 10, like so I'm holding myself accountable. And it's mentally challenging to stay in it all day. But I always try to approach it of like, hey, I'm trying to come to you, not come at you, come at you respectfully, and like being able to have a conversation. Like, can we come to some sort of solution? Because hey, the team is starting to kind of lose their shit. So like, can
Mm.
we like find this like balance between, being good and like understanding what you're doing, and maybe it's more of just like explaining why, like why do not we not keep score. Like I think even in that scenario, like having that understanding, maybe the team would be more understanding of like your situation. I don't know.
I could not agree with you more. I've never understood that. In fact, this year the year I was in Cannes in France, like a couple years ago, we ended up winning the league. First time I was on a team that won the league. It was a huge deal for me.
Yeah,
First time I
great.
won anything since like high school, so it was great. But it's amazing because our practices, like most of them, were pretty much the same structure every day, pretty much doing the same things, and we would always do 6-on-6, and we never kept score. And I just never, I am someone who likes, I think I like to live really intentionally. And there feels like there's no intention. Like we're just like it's just a check mark. Like, yeah, they played 6-on-6 volleyball and there's no
Yep.
intention. Even if it's something like, we're working on high ball or we're working on like some situation, it's like you need to compete.
Yep.
Like competing, I think also builds so much respect. Like I like talking a little shit with like guys that I love, like it's
Yep.
so different. And I'm so curious to see how you eventually like how you build your own coaching style
Yeah.
because I mean I'm sure you've taken mental note on like things you liked and things you didn't and now it's your turn to be on the opposite end of just like yeah we'll see how that goes
For sure. For sure. Well, and I think in general, I just always tried to like, as frustrating as it was at times, it was like just give people grace, right? Like as coaches, like they're trying their best of what they know, right? Like I don't know fully how to coach necessarily yet. I still think I have great tools and I've been, around some successful coaches, but I think there's still a lot to learn. And I think it's just as players, like giving coaches grace that like they're trying their best and they're trying what they feel is right for the team. And regardless of what that is or what your role is, like being okay in that space and like trying to navigate that. I don't know. I just think that, so often we're just like, well, this sucks, and it's just like, well, like, can we find something to be good at today? And then, having that conversation, but
and that leads me into like really the ultimate thought I have for you which is how many years did you play overseas in total?
13, I believe. Yeah.
13. Where do you find motivation? Like when I,
Yeah.
and I'll, again, I'm just like trying to better understand by speaking through my own experience. Like when I first started, it was like, oh boy, I'm like the eighth middle on the national team. I'm going to work my way up. I
Right.
haven't played overseas yet. This is all so new and exciting. I'm stoked. I'm going to Italy. Like I'm going to learn so much. And then as you like start to define who you are from a world stage, what you're capable of, you just every day at practice or in games or in big moments, you just like reconfirm the type of player you are. Now I've experienced, I don't think I'm a world class player by any means, but I've even experienced moments where I'm like, I just have to show up and stay out of my head and I'm going to ball out. And I started feeling like I was, and especially when practices feel mundane and that one year particularly, like I found myself like physically depressed in some way, like went through like a little bit of a depression. And a part of my reasoning for that was I feel like there's no intention anymore. Where it's like, what am I really trying to get better at? I'm good. I just put me in the game and let me show what I can do. Like you reach a certain point where, when you're younger, it's like there's so many obvious things you need to get better at. And then as you get really good at something, it becomes so much less obvious. And so I'm really curious to hear from you, like what started to become like, did you ever have moments where you were just like, I just am, and I know you're a little humble bumble over there, but like honestly, where you're just like, I just like don't, the motivation isn't there, or just like, I'm so good, I just need to show up, like not going into practice, like, okay, I'm really going to work on this. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, were there days where you showed up and you're just there because that's your job and you got to be there?
1,000%. And I would be lying if that like wasn't a reality a lot of times, right? Especially when you're away from home and you miss home. Like that also plays a massive role into it. And so I think that that's one of the challenges is like how can you stay in it even when it's not comfortable? And I think that's where my motivation was like, all right, Jordan, you don't want to show up. You really don't want to be here today. You don't. But how I always like related it back to the national team of like, how did I want to show up that summer? How did I want to be? And if this was one step closer of like fighting through the pain or fighting through the mental challenge, that was going to help me show up prepared for the summer. And so I think that I didn't want to ever show up to the national team or even like have, I don't know. I always felt like the coaches were looking at how you did on the like how you did overseas. Like if your team's making it to the finals, right? Like I always felt like I was an evaluation, and like if I didn't show up, then again my spot was going to be one step below. And so
Mm.
I was so not even fear, but just like that to me alone, like was enough to like kind of hold that. But don't get me wrong, that was not every day. And there was days, especially as I got older, that I was just like, yo, I physically can't show up every day, but how can I use my mind and how can I use, you know, just again, learning how to vocalize and expand that side of me versus like physically like outworking. But also too, I think, and maybe you feel the same, is like getting in the weight room, like that to me like really set me up for success as I got older, and spending a lot of time and dedication. That's where a lot of mental energy went versus like necessarily practice. So.
Well, yeah. And I actually don't know. Like, have you had a pretty healthy career?
Yeah. I sprained my meniscus my first year, and then I had a sprained ankle 2013. I had a cyst removed, otherwise, or 2013. Yeah, 2015. Had a cyst removed, otherwise that's pretty
Assist.
much.
The
Yeah,
the
and then I
biggest
had
downfall of
plantar.
her career is she had a cyst removed.
Yeah, and then I had a
Not bad.
plantar fasciitis, which is like by far the worst pain ever. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this conversation turns a little bit. Sorry, everyone. This is very selfish of me, but your boy over here, I did not know that. I've been dealing with plantar fasciitis for like the last 2 years. And in fact, like I ruptured my right foot. I ruptured the plantar fascia 5 weeks before we were leaving for VNL in the semifinals in France, and came back and like didn't make the Olympics. And in fact, after I recovered from my right foot, my left foot started. And that's actually a big reason why I took the last 2 or 3 months off, is because I was like, I don't know, this is the summer to take time off if you're going to, which I'm not in a position to just be like, yeah, I'll see you guys later, you know? And so it was a hard decision to make, but ultimately I'm like, I want to defeat this. So like, please, it sounds like you defeated it.
Thank goodness for COVID. Otherwise, without COVID, like, and COVID, I'm not like, I did not jump for like 3 months straight because I didn't know what it was. Like, I woke up one morning, I was like, why is my foot on fire? Like, what the hell, you know? And then I will go in, they're like, oh, we think you have plantar fascia. I was like, cool. What do I need to do? Like, it's like 2 or 3 weeks recovery, you know, like, oh, no. They're like, it could take up a year. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is like by far, and being a jumping athlete, like there's just no, like, unless you rupture it, they said, or you go in and you have surgery, like
Yeah.
there's really no way to. I was like, oh my God. And oh, it was by far the worst pain I've ever experienced.
And
So,
so you just not playing for 3 months and then you came back and it just went away?
yep.
Well, that's what I
I
did.
know.
So I really hope I can follow in your footsteps.
Are you feeling it now? Are you still feeling
I'm
pain? Or?
okay now, but I actually am still like, I still struggle with it. It's not as bad. Like, I don't know how bad you had it, but I would have it to where like the first 5 to 10 minutes of every morning, it's like I didn't even want to go up to pee. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
even want to stand up, you know, like really, really bad. And then it would be okay. And in fact, most times when I was playing, it wasn't too bad. It's like right when you cool down for the
Oh yeah.
rest of your day, it's just like on fire.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah, so crippling for me. And I'm so happy to hear that it hit you at the
Oh
right time.
goodness. Thank goodness. And I think that like, I mean, COVID stunk, right? Like being away from it, but I'm grateful because it allowed me to take a break a little bit and like then physically like ramp up again, because I was in really, really good shape at the Olympic Games because of COVID. If it wasn't for COVID, I would have been like, you know, hobbling into the Olympics, maybe not playing, you know.
Mm.
So it's just, yeah, it's just a massive, massive blessing.
Um, First of all, I'm so happy for you. I'm gonna say it again because I also don't. I just feel like it's rare. Like I don't talk to a lot of players who have dealt with plantar fasciitis from the volleyball world, and I did so much research on like who else
Oh,
in the like professional athlete community has had this, and there's not a ton. You see the same kind of like ice water bottle. You see the same kind of things, you know. But this is my own journey. I could do an entire podcast alone about
oh,
my feelings towards
seriously.
plantar fasciitis, so we don't need to do that. Um, you talked about like you said like when COVID hit, it gave you a chance to step back and to find balance. At what point in your career did you feel like balance was really important to you? And I don't know if it is or how you feel about that. I shouldn't inject that in you. But I guess what I'm saying is like, I don't know. As I've gotten older, I've been like, volleyball is just, it's not enough on its own. At what point did you feel like volleyball is not enough for me? I need to bring my attention to other areas of my life and pursue other things as well.
I always struggle with this question because yeah, balance isn't really in my vocabulary as far as like, I'm just a volley person for life. Like like it really consumes a lot of me, and I love talking about it. I love like having conversations about like this because it's just like, I love like the mindset behind it and like the challenge that it is to like constantly be good over time. And, yeah, I can't get enough. And I think that's where I've been able to stay in it as long as I have, because
Mm,
the burnout factor hasn't really ever hit me. Yeah, of course there's been lulls and times where I'm like, all right, like I need some time off. But in general, like I've been pretty like, hey, I love it. And like what we get to do is so unique, right? Like, cause every
mhm.
time you talk to somebody, they're like, oh my God, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm a professional volleyball player. They're like, wait, what? You get to travel like people are just so fascinated. And it's like, I should be grateful, like, like, and
Yeah.
I think that's where I spend a lot of my time of like, hey, like I've been able to do all these things, and without volleyball, like what would it be, And so, but I think that's where I spend a lot more of my time of I love the game. I love learning about it and talking about it. So
First of all, sick, and congratulations to those kids you're going to coach, because
yeah.
that's just really cool to hear. Because I think a lot of times maybe like I understand my own bias. I'm almost like looking to complain with people sometimes about like how tough it can be, and that's just my own complex. But
Oh,
even for someone who loves it so much, it's like there's still, I don't know, there's tough times when you're overseas, you know.
1,000%. And not trying to not say that I think how you
No, we need to
responded
keep go. We need your narrative is the
no,
better
no.
narrative. Okay.
I feel like you're like it's a very normal response. And like, don't get me wrong, there are times that has been, but I just think I try to like, yeah, stay on the side of just loving it and like loving to learn. So,
And I don't like we don't need to get like too deep into like what you've done in the past, but I am curious like what have you done? Like what do you do with your spare time? Like
yeah.
obviously like you're married now, you know it's so different and you're not playing anymore. I don't know. Who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows? You're going to get a contract that's going to be like for a month and you're going to take it. We all know
Yeah,
this.
exactly. We don't
Okay,
actually know.
you figured it
Yeah.
out. You figured it out now. But
Yeah.
in general when you were like, I don't know, in the middle of your career or something, like what did you do with all your free time?
Yeah, probably wasn't the best. I tried to. I went and took some classes a couple times. Like I thought I was like, do I get a grad degree? I don't know. I tried to read a little bit. Like obviously watch a ton of shows. Probably wasn't super productive. Because I think that I like my time away was so just like, how do I check out a little bit? But then also half the time I was watching volleyball. I was like, oh, someone's playing, and like, how can I watch video? Or just trying to be better of like, or even like replaying like, all right, today in practice we did this, and how can I be better tomorrow? And a lot of that time and energy was spent on those thoughts. So
Wow.
I know my
No, I mean, it's amazing. It's an obvious like testament to the career you've had, you know, like getting obsessed with anything and finding a way to stay obsessed with it after you've been doing it at such a high level for so long is, I can imagine in its own way, like so difficult. So good on you, honestly.
yeah. No,
No, that's
and I know it's
amazing.
not normal too. Like some people are like, wait, what? You don't, it's like, well, I would go out with friends and do stuff like that, but oftentimes it was just, yeah, resetting for the next day.
And did you ever have any like long-term relationship stuff?
Yes. So I was married previously. So I got married right out of college,
Oh,
at
wow.
22. Yep. So I got married right out of college, and my husband at the time, he actually traveled with me my first 4 seasons when I was in Russia. And then he was kind of like back and forth my 5th year in Russia. And then we moved to Turkey. And then at that point we separated. And so
Mm,
then, but yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, it's not an easy lifestyle. I'm sure you can attest to it. Like,
sure.
unless someone's coming with you, really. And then how it worked for us was we were together overseas, but then when I was with the national team, we were apart. So it was like we were together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then apart. And so it's hard. And we're traveling all over the place. We're a little bit selfish because we're trying to be good. And I don't think people really understand like the mental and physical capacity, right? Like even if you're dealing like physically, like it takes up a lot of mental capacity, because you're like, all right, this hurts, but I got to be good
Yeah.
tomorrow, so it's a little bit, we're a little bit selfish in that, because it's like the parameters of thinking outside of like how we have to be on all the time.
Okay, wait, really quickly. Throughout this conversation, you've just been like slightly getting darker.
I know. Do
Do you
you?
have a light? Is this weird for you? I mean, I'm going to use the video, but
Oh, you are going to use the video. Okay.
well,
I
I
was
just
going
want
to
you to be
ask you that. I was
comfortable and
like,
chill. So if
no.
like the darkness is your vibe, then like let's keep it dark. You know, a little bat cave in here.
No, I was just like, well, I don't know if he needs light, but yeah, we
No, it's
have
all
lights. There's
we have
lights.
light. Let there be light. And there
I went
is.
I went golfing today. I met Mia Hamm randomly. Went golfing with
Whoa.
Mia Hamm today. Yeah.
Whoa, dude, you know what? Mia Hamm is someone like I remember she was like my first soccer crush ever. And I was a soccer kid growing up. And
Yeah.
yeah, dude, I loved Mia Hamm. I can't believe I hate to say that she's still alive. I'm sure she's young and youthful. You know what it is? You know when you're a kid and like Justin Bieber when I was a kid or something, and he's just like, look at this like 6-year-old kid. And then we grow up and I'm like, oh, he's like 2 years younger than me or something. Like, what is that time warp? What is going on there?
I don't know. I don't know. That's so funny. It's such a yeah, that totally makes sense.
Also, like, good on you to just hang up the shoes and go straight to golf. Were you always a golfer, or this is like
Yeah,
a
yeah. My dad would just randomly take us out. I was more inclined like to want to drive the cart than actually like hit the ball. But
it has to be the
yeah,
best
it
part.
was, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. So I just was out like, going with him like randomly. I wouldn't say it was very serious and I didn't really golf all that much, but when I would have some time off, like I would go with my friends. But yeah, now it's kind of like, well, we live close to the country club, so why don't we do that? So
Yo, and first of all, how was it meeting Mia Hamm? Did you guys talk at all? Did you chat it up?
yeah, it was great. Yeah, we went out with the soccer coach here at UT, and she actually played with Mia back in the day, and so we went out and just had a great time. She's super chill, like she's a really good golfer, definitely humbled all of us.
Whoa,
But
sick.
yeah, she's awesome, and gotta kind of pick her brain a little bit, and yeah, just asked her if she missed the arena, like being in the arena, and she just said I think her injuries kind of towards the end of the career, like she just had to like step away. And but yeah, she
Mm.
said she misses her teammates and being around them. So
Uh, so I don't have official word from you, and I don't even know if like you're considering yourself retired or not. Are you? Are you not? You don't have to answer if it's like a I
yeah,
don't
no,
know.
I don't know. I don't I haven't like officially said anything. I think that it's the right move. I also know that life has a funny way of, throwing curveballs at us. So honestly, I think, and I don't know how you feel, but like you've committed a lot of years to it. And I mean, I've committed a ton of years and it's like, all right, well, what's your decision? And it's like, I think even the last 3 seasons, I've played like these really short contracts, like 2 months, 2 months off, 2 months on, like in my mind still feels pretty fresh. My body still feels pretty good. So I'm kind of just like, let's see how this plays out and what could happen. So not trying to close any doors, but also like feel like it's the right decision, but also I just maybe just slide out.
I love that move. I love the moonwalk out. You know, what is it called? The Irish goodbye, I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
it's called.
Yeah.
I love that for you. I am curious also what do you recommend when it comes to taking contracts overseas? Because,
Mm,
and I'll speak from the men's side. I don't know. I'm excited to hear what it's like on the women's side. But like, for example, I think one of the shortest, Puerto Rico used to be a place you could get a short contract from the men's side. I
yeah.
don't know if that's happening really anymore. I know that like China, for example, is like kind of November to February, and they pay you like really well to go play for what 3 months or something.
Mhm.
And other than that, from the men's side, I don't know if there are much other like short opportunities. I know there's like kind of what I'm hinting at is a few things. First of all, actually the main thing I would want to know is, do you recommend for people to like go get bags, like go make money, like go somewhere where you could just make a bunch of money and you're in a shit league, or work your way up? Because as someone like myself, and we don't need to go over specific numbers, but I'm a breadcrumb boy, you know? So like when I first started playing overseas, I was playing for nothing. Like my first contract was like 25 grand to go play in Italy. It's nothing, you know? And I was just chasing like wanting to prove myself and wanting to play with the best players in the world and wanting to show what I could do for myself and just in general. And then looking back on it, I'm like, dang, I see friends who like call them who are technically professional volleyball players and they play in like Indonesia or something. And I'm like against like babies, just like kids, and they're just destroying. And I'm like, that's not professional volleyball. Like what? And then it's like, oh, what? You made over 100K playing in Indonesia? What? You practice 3 times a week and you live in Indonesia? What am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm so curious from you because you've done both, right? You've played in the best leagues in the world and you've also played in leagues where maybe they're not as good, but you can just make a bunch of money for a short amount of time. Like
Yep.
what do you think about any of that?
Yeah. So I think I've just been really lucky that like where I've gone, like Russia when I went was like one of the top leagues, and then they could also pay. And then I went to Turkey, where it was also one of the top leagues and they could also pay. So I was lucky enough that like I just kept getting like contract increases every single year and
Mm.
nobody could really match it. And so it was just like an obvious choice for me.
And
And
just for people who don't know, sorry to interrupt you, what
yep.
is like the WNBA and proceeding down? Like what does that look like? Where is the WNBA for
What do
women's
you mean by
volleyball?
what do you mean by that?
Like for example, on the men's side, like if you're playing in Italy or Poland, like that's the NBA. That's like
Okay.
those are top to bottom, like the best leagues you could possibly go play and prove yourself.
Okay.
And there's
Gotcha.
like maybe Russia and Turkey and like France and some trickle down, but like
Yep.
working your way up to the top league, what is that like for women?
Yeah, I would probably say like Turkey is probably by far Turkey and Italy are probably the top two right now. I would say it's kind of tough. I don't know how it is for you guys, but it's like in Turkey, it's probably top four teams, top five, and then after it kind of trickles.
Mm-hmm.
Where Italy, kind of the argument is like all the teams are relatively good. Like it could go either way any night. But still your top two contenders, Champions Leagues, things like that. And then after that, I mean, I think Russia's kind of up there, China as well. But that's kind of really, and then you have like Germany and like France after that. So,
Mm.
yeah, I would probably say that. But yeah, I think for me, again, I was lucky that the level of the league and the money was always
Well, and I
high
feel you. I
level.
want to say something really quickly because you're a bit of an anomaly to ask this question to.
Yep.
Because from what I think to be true, probably the same on the women's side. For example, like if you're with the national team and you're playing in the summer and you're playing good, your opportunity to play in good places increases most likely. And then
Yep.
you go to a league like Italy or Turkey and you play well, like you're staying there. That's obvious.
Yep.
What about for like if you're, I don't know, you just graduated college and you're just like, you were really good and you want to play professional and you'll for sure have that opportunity. And do you take, would you advise to like younger women, if you have the opportunity to go play for a ton of money, and I don't know what leagues that would be, like for us, it's kind of like Japan, Korea, where you can go make tons of money and the league's like not good at all. It's not
Yep.
super competitive, or it is in a different way, let's say. Like, how do you advise women on taking that path to like go pursue trying to play in the best leagues that you can so you can really test and prove to yourself what you're capable of, or go make tons of money because ultimately volleyball is going to end and then what? Like no one cares. Like that's the interesting thing, right? Is like you play, you're a legend, but then 30 years from now you're going to be like, yeah, it's me, Jordan Larson. I've won some medals, and like, well, hopefully not. People will remember you. For me, it'll be like, guys, remember I played like a long, be a different story for me for sure.
No,
But
definitely
you
not.
know what I'm saying? Like, what do you think?
So I think there's two things. I think first and foremost, I always valued the national team like over anything else. So for
Hmm,
me, it was, hey, Karch, like I want to be in the gym. What do I got to do to be in the gym? If
interesting.
that means I'm playing in this league and you're going to look at me, then I'm going to go play in that league, even if the money was less. However, I think that depends on the year of the quad, right? So I think if you're coming in early in the quad, and that, again, this is all my perception. If you're coming in
Yeah.
early in the quad, like you're probably going to take a little bit less money playing in a better league, because the chances of you playing maybe long term in the summer leading up to Olympic Games is much higher. Now, say you're coming in kind of second to third year of the quad, maybe the chances of you making that Olympic team are a little bit less because you haven't been in the gym long enough. So then therefore I would be more inclined to take the money in a lower league, because it's like, hey, I'm spending time overseas anyways. I might as well make the money while I can. At
Wow,
least that
that's
was for that
that
was
feels
for
like
me.
the opposite of what you would do. You would think like if you're someone who's like, I don't know if I'll make the traveling squad in the Olympics or not, I should probably go play in the best league as quickly as I can to prove what I can do. But you're saying actually go make some money and just maybe
Well,
enjoy
because I mean,
yourself
like the
more.
odds are like maybe you wouldn't do that, and maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's not right. But I always kind of went to like, where, well, who's gonna pay me? I'm like, I'm away from home. Like, do I want
Yeah.
to, like, I wasn't so concerned about living this like fantastic life outside. I was like, well, I'm going to play volleyball. I'm in a foreign country. I'm away from family. It's gonna be hard anyways. I might as well make it worth my time. So,
Sure.
like that's why like money was kind of a pretty big factor for me always, was like, hey, you're willing to pay me what? And I'm willing to live in Russia for 5 years. All right, sign me up, like let's roll. So yeah.
Um, I have a few things. The first thing I think about is like, do you know any ladies from the women's team or this maybe that you know that aren't on the national team that did kind of the climb? And by that I mean like Dustin Watton's a great example. Like he
Yep.
started in like I don't know Finland or somewhere and played in shit leagues for like most of like half of his career, and then finally got opportunities and finally started exposing. And now he's playing in Poland and has been really great. Do you know any women who have a similar journey?
Yeah, for sure. I think like Michelle Barch a little bit, and maybe I might be able like misspoken a little bit kind of how her journey was, but I think she originally kind of started playing, then stopped, started coaching men in Irvine, and then wanted to get back into it, kind of played in Germany for 3 years, got asked to come to the national team finally, and so kind of worked herself up into like one of the top teams in Turkey and played there for a couple of years. So it's like, yeah, I mean, she was still playing at a very high, like a pretty high level in Germany, but I think in general, like that path is much different, and even Kim Hill originally like making it from the tryout, making the national team, and then kind of going over there, like going overseas after that point, and
Hmm.
starting in Poland, and then she went to I don't remember what other where she went after that. I think Italy after that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know to like Dustin's start exactly, but yeah, for sure there was some girls that had paid that path. So
I can just imagine, like, I was also very fortunate to go straight from college into Italy, and I went super cheap, as I told you. But, like, that was also really lucky. And at that point, it's like, I don't know how much I can be making doing this, but I think there's more money on the women's side professionally.
yeah, I mean, I think it depends. I don't know. I mean, I think that maybe some of the top women, like the threshold is a little bit higher, but I think your guys is like middle of the pack, like seems to be like a little more like depth, if that makes sense. So like I think there are some high end like earners for sure on the women's side, but like I feel like you guys are consistently making 2 to 300,000 like every season, where we're like maybe 150, 200,000 like consistently. That makes sense.
Do you see this? For
I'm
those of
looking at
you listening,
I'm
I'm,
looking at
I'm
you.
looking I'm looking past me because there's no way she's talking to me when she says that on average guys are making between 2 and 300K. That's hilarious. Well, let me say this: like, I know so many players who, like, let's say they start in Austria and it's like 1,000 a month to go play in Austria.
Yeah.
Like, whew,
Yeah. I
you
wouldn't do
know?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, but like, what do you do then if you're someone who's, especially if you're not on the national team? And
Yeah.
like, it's so interesting because I know for myself, like, I've never gotten a contract because of what I've done on the national team. So
Really?
it never. And so I've always found that interesting because you have some people who are like, the national team doesn't matter that much. And then you have some people who are like, it definitely matters and you can definitely get contracts for sure. The problem is that, like, national team tournaments don't start until like late May
Yep.
or early June. And by then, like, so many people have signed. It's interesting. I did an episode with Matt and we talked a little bit about this idea, like just free floating ideas, of how the volleyball could change. And one of them was creating like a free agency period to where like guys can't sign contracts too early. And I don't know how you feel about this or how this is on the women's side. I'm really curious. But like, for example, Poland signs like a majority of their main guys by like January. So that's the middle of the season. They like have a very good idea of who's signing or not. France is like February, March, April, then Italy's a little later, but like most of these guys are signing so early now. Like, do you think that's a problem or not? Like the idea of like, hey, you're only allowed to make trades or sign contracts in May. Like, I wonder what that would do.
I also wonder about that too. Yeah. I mean, I think they're, yeah. I mean, I think when I think about Matt's team, right? Like in Perugia, like I think some of them knew they were coming back, then some knew they weren't coming back. I mean, it just creates like an awkward culture, but yet, hey, we're supposed to fight to the end. And it's just like, like, but then this player could be playing for the other team. So then what's the motivation? I agree. I think it complicates everything. It's nice as a player, right? Like, hey, I'm
For
coming
sure.
back, or I have a contract for next
Safety.
season. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Like there's job security, like that all makes sense. But I think that yeah, like having like some sort of like quiet period or something like would make a ton of sense.
And
So
this is, and again, I'm so curious to see what you think, but like, this is where a little bit of like the politics of professional volleyball comes in. Maybe even you could say like the business side of it, where it's like, yeah, what's your motivation when you sign a contract in January? You know you're getting paid for the rest of your time there. Now, granted, obviously, like we're all competitive, all of us. If you want to be one of the best, like you have to have a bit of that competitive edge. So we all want to play. But
yeah,
I've just seen it time and time again where guys sign early contracts and they just care a little less. And a lot of that is more in the training. Like obviously in the game, like they're trying as hard. They're not caring. You're still on a stage and people are watching and like you're still playing.
right.
But do you ever
Exactly.
experience where like some girls sign a contract early and then they just kind of like slack off in training?
Yeah, just yeah, kind of coast till the end. And I think that that's where it gets dangerous. And I think that yeah, like having a quiet period would be great.
I'm
And
gonna
if
make a
anything, it's just like how, yeah, yeah, like what would that eliminate? I don't know. For me, like I just never wanted to feel, I always wanted to have the power or the control, right? Like I never wanted to get to the end of the season and then they're like, maybe we want her back. Maybe no.
yeah,
I always wanted the team to want me back, but then me to make a choice if I wanted to come back or not. Because
yeah.
it like in that point, like I had options. Like, and if you get yourself in a point where you have options, like it's better than not having anything. So I just always wanted to make sure, like, even if I had a contract the next year, I've seen people where they've pulled contracts and I'm like, I don't want to be in that position.
And you've
Why would
never
I?
been in that position?
Where they pulled a contract?
Or like there's never been any like kind of skeevy nothing.
No, nothing. Even like super late payments. Like I think on my entire career, like I had 1 month late, which
Wow.
is like really like in a
That
volleyball career, like that's
that's
really
good.
unheard. That's
No,
really
that's
unheard.
really good.
Yeah,
And that's the perks of playing for clubs that are legit,
for sure.
you know.
For sure.
Have
And
you do
again,
you,
but I wanted to be in control of it. Like I think that
hmm.
it's like if you can control the setting as much as you, as volleyball players, we're always trying to control our surroundings, but if you can get to a point where you can try to control a little bit of it, right? By showing up every day and being consistent and showing those things, like people want to hire you. So
Yeah, I wonder you keep saying things and I'm like I'm so excited for you to experience them as a coach, you know? Because that was the big thing I learned from this year. It was or just from this summer was like, oh, it's just so different. Especially like even for myself, I was like, I have so much knowledge I want to share. Like
right.
I'm going to give these kids so many tools. And then there's kids who just like don't look like they care at all. And I'm just like, I'm so hurt by it, you know?
I know.
I'm like, dude, I think I'm like, it's very easy to talk to. I think I create a space that's like, you can just be yourself, you know? Like, you don't like it, like, come to me. What's up, dude? We'll change it. But
Yeah.
then they're just like kids or they're just, you know? But you know what I think? I'm going to say something blank in statement. I'm not sure about it. I think that women try harder than men.
Like
I think women
you're
care. A blanket statement here.
okay. I was like, in what category? We're
What I
talking
mean
volleyball
is,
or is it in
and
general?
I don't know. I can't wait for you to prove me right or wrong here.
Okay.
I think that women are they're so much more stoic than men, in my opinion. Like showing up and just like doing what has to be done. I don't see them a lot of times being ones to like really argue with coaches. It seems very drama free.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, at times, yes, I see what you're saying. Like, we're definitely not challenging as much, maybe on the men's side. I don't know fully what that looks like, but yeah. But I also think that then you get a little more like off the court too, where it's like, would you rather hear it more up front, or would you like to hear things that are happening? I don't know.
Like, what would you say to like what do you? We talked about this, I guess, a little bit earlier, but like I'm just thinking of like maybe like a girl who's in a situation right now where she's on her college team and she doesn't like her coach or she feels intimidated to speak with him. Like, what is your advice to those types of women? I'm sure you've been around them or maybe once was, I don't know. To like kind of break that seal and learn to ask questions and learn to engage and learn to like break past that barrier that can seem scary of like he's the coach. And so many coaches are different, right? Like some coaches are like going to have you run lines and some coaches just come in with this face. And then some coaches, it's like, I feel like they're my best friend, you know? And I think to your point, it's like every season is so different. Every year is different, like learning to navigate different strategies. So like what would you recommend for someone who's in that position where they just feel like maybe like, or also like they don't feel like they're the best, right? Like a lot of times when you've like earned it and you're like the girl or the guy, it's so much easier to be like, yeah, I'm gonna go talk to the coach. But when you're
Yeah.
just like fighting for spots or like, and I experienced that even with John, it's like I'm not the guy to like want to ask about this or talk about this. I'm just like sit there and shut up and do my best guy. Like and I think that causes problems. I wish that more I wish that there wasn't even something talked about, but it seems to me to be across like multi planes of sports in general that's a common theme of players feeling like they can't be super vulnerable with their coach.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a very natural thing. And my parents always encourage me like to speak to kind of a third party. So whether that's a sports psychologist, a psychologist in general, like you kind of have someone that's really outside of like, because your parents are hearing your bias, right? Like they're hearing only your side, and like they can't really, at least my parents were like, well, if you want to talk to coach, like that's on you. We're not going to go talk to the coach on your
Mm.
behalf. But how to frame that conversation is something that like my parents always kind of sat me down. Okay, well, what do you want to say? How do you want to say it? Write notes down, like talk it out before you even get in there, because I would go in there and be like, oh, and then I'll end up like crying or something. And then I'm like, oh shit, I didn't look at my notes, but like when you have something like there that you can reference, it's easy to like have that
You're
conversation.
talking about
I also
PowerPoints. Make a
say what?
PowerPoint. Making PowerPoints is
Yeah,
what you're talking
exactly.
about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So now watch this PowerPoint. No, and then I think just speaking with a sports psychologist or a psychologist, I'm like, hey, I'm feeling these things. Are they valid? How can I best, feel like I'm being heard? And maybe that is approaching the coach, and maybe that's not. Maybe the sports psychologist then it gives you tools on how to manage how you're feeling without having to talk to the coach, And so I think kind of navigating that space.
What tools did you use? Because like when you're overseas, and now maybe you had the resources, but and being on the national team, we do have the resource to like sports psychologists.
Yep.
But maybe there's times where you didn't feel like you could reach out to one or didn't or whatever. Like, do you have any tools that were helpful for you to like either get in that kind of mindset, or even it doesn't even have to be like with a coach, it could just be like you finding like you're way too in your own head and you're overthinking? Like, are there any tools that people could list, like you could explain, that were something that you use that you felt like would be beneficial for a lot of people?
Yeah, for sure. I always try to rewatch the match or think of back, because I think sometimes our reality isn't actually reality, right? Like how we perceive it in the moment isn't actually, when you go back and watch it, like what actually happened at times. And so like kind of retraining your mind of like, all right, it wasn't as bad as what I thought, and then also, I don't know, I think we're lucky on the national team that we have, Karch or Hugh, and like able to ask a ton of questions like, hey, did you watch this match? Or, hey, can you watch these clips? Like, what do you see? This is what I'm seeing. And, how can I be better here? Or, hey, I'm trying to be good for the national team. What do I need to change and practice this week that I could set myself up for success? So I think it's just being and asking those questions.
I gotta ask you, you made that sound like you would do that now, and like we kind of already touched on this, but I'm still so curious. Like, when is Jordan Larson like, hey, will you watch this game? Like, what do you think I could work on? Like, what? And
Oh,
here's what I mean, right?
yeah.
Let's talk about serving, for example.
Yep.
Like, I've had times where like I hit a ball and the second I make contact, I feel like I've done it so much. Like, I know what the mistake was. I know what the adjustment needs to be made. And like, as someone who's, for example, didn't play for the last like kind of 2 or 3 months, slowly getting back into it, it's like I got to let my body get rid of all these mistakes and get all that stuff back. And then they'll have coaches who are like, a little lower, a little here, a little here, and it makes me mad. Like, do you not think I know that? And so
Right.
I'm curious from you, like, I feel like you asking for feedback, like, good on you. I feel like that would be hard to do. If I were you and I was such a fucking baller and like won all these medals, be like, I'm not asking anyone for feedback. It's like if I got aced in a seam, or if I like made a bad decision and missed the line, or like if I served a ball into the net, it's like I can only imagine that you already know the correction.
For sure. And I think I do, but also I think in general, like I think just in life, like I need a little bit of reassurance that I'm doing the
Mm.
right thing and that I'm on the right path, because I think I need that confirmation that I'm still taking the right steps, because in my mind I feel like, yeah, okay, this feels like the right thing, but maybe I'm like way off of what it actually is, And so I think that And I never just wanted to stop getting better. Like I never wanted to get to the point where I'm like, yeah, I mean, what you're saying, I don't know. I always wanted to be open. And my mom always said, like, be a sponge, like take it all in. So even if it's like something that you already know, like listen, like take it in and like do what you want with it, even if it's not something that you actually apply. But like, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. So I
Oh,
just
it
always
does.
tried to keep that like mentality and be like at the forefront of my mind of just, I don't feel, and again, I think that's where confidence comes into play. Like, I don't know if I've ever been the most confident player at times because of my physical capabilities, right? Like, again, I don't jump the highest, I don't hit the hardest,
It's
but
so crazy.
I am able to do other things. But I often don't equate that, because a lot of times during my career it's like, well, you don't touch this. And it's like, okay, well, I never have been, but like, can I still be successful with the tools that I have been given?
It's so crazy. When I spoke with Kelsey, she said the same thing about herself. I see these like two high level successful ballers, and both of you bang. Like both of you hit hard, and both of you were like, yeah, I struggled with a little bit of that internally. Do you wonder like why? Like why you felt the need
I
for
mean, I
that?
think I'm
I'm not
sure
your
you feel it.
psychologist and don't take any like I'm not
Oh
okay,
no.
but you know.
No. I'm sure you feel at times like you're just like, you question yourself, and I probably question myself too much, and I think
Mm,
we're our own worst critic, right? It's
mm-hmm.
like, but in general, I think in life I've always tried to be like, okay, well, what can I do in this scenario to make it better? And I think I've probably gone too far that side where I don't necessarily stick up sometimes for what I actually truly believe.
Mm,
um that I'm just like super content with like, hey, whatever the group wants, I just don't want to ruffle any feathers. And
hmm.
so it's just like
You stay
finding
in
that.
your lane.
Yes, but then also times that can be perceived as like, well, what's wrong with Jordan? And so,
Uh,
but in reality, like that's never been where my heart or like my intention has ever been, right? It's like, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I want to be good, and I want to be good for the team because I want to be a part of the team, not because, hey, look at me and this is me, like that's
do you
never
think
been.
do you think there's girls who are intimidated by you?
Uh, I think people have shared that with me, yes,
Hmm.
which is like hard for me to hear because I'm just like, I don't know what I did, or
Mm-hmm.
like, I want to be liked by people. I think it's a very normal thing to be. But yeah, that's been a hard thing for me to like overcome at times because I'm just like, I just want to be good, and I want to be like good for my team. And like, that's where my priority is versus like, hey, this is all about like me and like being the center. Like, cause I am like not one person, like I can play in front of thousands, but speaking in front of people, like no way.
You're such a honest and humble and honorable woman. Like
Yeah.
everything you're saying, it's just like it's beautiful. And I'm just always having to play devil's advocate for no reason. But I'm just over here thinking like, you're telling me there's no bit of Jordan Larson that's like cocky. And I'm not saying it's verbal. And I'm curious. And the reason I say that is like, oh, this is great actually. So like when my first year in France, I played in Italy for 3 years because of like a foreigner rule, and our setter got hurt. We had to bring in a foreign setter. I didn't play for some, and I had to get subbed in and out a lot. It was the worst. So I didn't
Oh,
get to stay in Italy, and I had to go to France. And like I told you, it's like you go from France into Italy, Poland, somewhere better, hopefully. And I had to
right,
go down. That's how I took it, as I'm going down. And I was
right.
so mad. I was like, fuck this. Like, I know I'm good enough to stay in Italy. I know the player I am. Yes, I'm 6'5" middle and like not the best jumper. And, but like, I know, look at the stats. Like, I was a stats guy for a little bit because I had to be. Because like, if you're 7 feet tall, it's like you're always going to get a chance. So for us, for people like us,
Yes,
it's different. Okay.
yes,
Um,
exactly.
I just remember being like mad. And granted, I was in Chaumont, and for those of you who don't know Chaumont, I know you don't know Chaumont because it's a straight up village and it's always cloudy and it was raining a ton and cold and just like not like maybe 10 to 15,000 people, like really small, which was cool, but it was just tiny. There was nothing. It was dead. And it was all volleyball. And I remember being like, this is my jail cell and I will get out of jail. And the only way to get out of it is to fuck shit up. And that's the attitude I had. And I found myself like wanting to engage. I'm not by no means like I also think I'm a humble guy. I think like I'm not suggesting to people to be cocky or like just be
Right,
yourself. But
for
that was
sure.
myself at that moment, is feeling like I had to have this edge, almost like I had to trick myself into having this edge to perform and get out of France, and did. And that's a different story. But like
No,
ended
I
up
think
getting
it's
out of it and had such a great year. And after that year, I was like, oh, I actually feel like some of that maybe was bleeding into my life outside of volleyball. So I can imagine, and you know this, especially when you're overseas, like you have to be your number one fan because no one fucking cares. You know,
Yep.
like no one cares. If you don't play good, they're going to get rid of you and they're going to find someone who can hopefully play better. That's just how it
Exactly.
is. And
Mhm.
so I'm curious from you, like, okay, you don't seem like you're, externally or internally cocky, but like, where do you find it difficult to be your number one fan sometimes?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah, I remember when I don't remember what club was at. Like I got subbed out once, and like the president is like standing up clapping, and I'm just like, well,
Wow.
that sucks. Like it's just like, all right, well, but also it's like, hey, like you want to be here, and like that's just another level for you to like go beyond. And so I think I also think growing up, like I was never like I was the number one or number two recruit coming out of high school. And I was like, well, dang, like I wanted to be number one. And like I was just always this like step behind and like you said,
Mm,
like this edge. And so I always felt like I was pushing this edge that I never felt like this like contentness or like cockiness because I was just like, well, I don't even know if I belong, right? Like I'm
mm,
just trying to belong and trying to be here because I want to be here. And if I slack off one day, like I'm out. And I just never, like I was saying, like wanting to control certain things, like I just never wanted that feeling. And if I like show up every day and just try to be consistent, maybe I could do that and do it consistently. So I
So
think that, yeah,
wait, just walk me through. You get subbed out. President's standing ovation for you
yeah.
in a bad
Like, thank
way.
goodness, like, why is
She's
she
out.
just now getting taken out? Like, she
Take
should have been
me
taken out.
take me into your mind and thus forward.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, like I didn't really know the club all that well. Like, obviously, like I have a great relationship with them now, but just learning that, like you said, they're paying you to perform. And if you don't show up, like they're going to find someone else. And like, that's, I think, what makes our job so hard is like you are expected to show up sometimes twice a week at a very, very high level. And if you can't do that, then like you're not going to get paid. So
Mhm.
it's like, it's finding that balance of like, all right, like, did I deserve to be taken out? 1,000%, right? Like I was like, take me out, please.
Mm.
But then it's also like, how can I reframe this of like, what could I have done better? And, how can I not allow that to happen again? Like get to that point where it's like, hey, like take me out.
So you go instantly into I agree with you, President. Great standing ovation. I agree with you. And
Yep,
now you go straight into like, okay, it's that moment's over. Like I gotta figure out what I can do to get better so that doesn't happen again.
exactly.
Wow. I feel like that's very impressive to have such a high level of self-awareness and intention in what you're doing because that's like the like stoic thing to do,
Yep,
and we all know that if you can learn not to ride your highs and your lows and find something in between, like it just lasts longer and sets you up for success, right? Like as you for sure know, like the best games you've ever played, like you weren't thinking, you were just playing.
yep.
And I guess what I was really curious to know how you handle that kind of defeat because also it can happen like not even in you having your worst performance, like missing a serve bad or something, or like, yeah, just like you're doing great. Like this happens to me because as a middle, it's like the only three things that matter are serving, blocking, and attacking. And if you got two or three that are on fire, like you're doing pretty good, most likely. But it's like I've had games where it was like blocking and attacking, I feel great, but I just keep bricking serves and I brick like three in a row and I miss five in a 3 set match or something where it's like, well, how can you keep me in if I keep missing serves like that? And I get so in my head. And obviously, like I've had enough experience now to be like, you take that exact mindset of, okay, we're breaking serves. What can we work on? I wonder why. Like, what's going on? Like, how can I learn to harness those emotions? And so I'm curious for you. I can imagine playing on such a stage, which I'm actually really curious. Like, what stage was the most nerve wracking for you to play on, or like a moment, whether it was
Hmm.
for a medal or maybe it was overseas for like a Champions League, or like was there a match where you were just like, whoa, this is a lot right now?
Yeah, I think it was my second year on the national team. We were playing Japan, and like Japan is very good about targeting like who they're serving. And I was obviously passing to Logan Tom, who's an absolute legend, Nicole Davis, who's also an absolute legend, and then there's me, second year on the national team, and I'm just like, oh shit, like here we go, and like I remember Karch was the assistant coach at the time, and like they call a timeout in the fourth set, and I think at that point I had already received like 45 serves or something like gnarly. And he's like, how are you doing? And I'm just like, my eyes are crossed because I'm just like, oh my, I'm just trying to stay afloat. I'm just like,
Mm.
I can't. And they're just like, keep pelting. Like, and I'm holding up, like I'm hanging in there, but I'm just like, in my mind, I'm like, oh gosh, like, how do I keep this, grind up? But going back to like, I think that's what's tough about being a middle blocker or even an opposite, and even a setter, like the amount of times that like or skills as an outside hitter that we get to kind of control, right? Like my defense, my blocking, I can serve, I can pass, I can set out a system. Like there's a lot more facets of the game that I can really still have an impact if one
Mm.
area isn't going well. And so I think I tried to learn that early on in my career is like you, for example, like, okay, you missed two in a row. Like, all right, on this third one, like, I'm just trying to keep the shit in and like go. And so it's like,
Wait,
how
wait.
can
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to
no,
pop in really quickly. That exact example is so good, right? Because I remember being in college. I'm sure you felt the same, where it was like bang or die,
yeah,
like hit the ball hard or die. There
yeah,
was no like cuffing it in. And then it takes and you always had coaches who are like, never miss three in a row as a team normally. In general, that's a pretty safe rule. And like
yeah.
for yourself, and like, did you ever feel like that evolution of yourself where you're like, oh, now I get it. Like I get why that makes sense. And in fact, it doesn't hurt my ego anymore. It's like now I'm doing the smarter thing and this works.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like that like shift on the national team. Like when I first came to the national team, it was like, hey, we got to play smarter volleyball, not harder. And, I think I learned early on, like youth national team days, I was jump serving and it was like, hey, like start at 40%, then 50%, then see, and every chance you got back to serve, like you're just ramping it up even more, but you're still keeping it in because I mean, at the end of the day, like you serving it in over the net, you still have a 25% chance, roughly 25% chance of winning that point. So why missing that serve? Like, when you're just basically handing them the ball and they don't have to do anything. Like it doesn't make any sense.
I'm
And
gonna
so
ask you. I'm gonna ask you a question about. Um, this is gonna be future of you as a coach. So people listening, this is like what you're gonna sound like. I'm gonna ask you a tough question. Okay. Your team's breaking serves
yep.
three in a row, missed.
Yeah.
How do you get players? Definite timeout. Love that
Oh,
already for sure. If I had a whistle noise, I would hit it right now. Um, you obviously don't want you want them to recognize that there's too many missed serves. But
yep.
how many times I've had coaches say put the ball in and guys start missing more serves because they're thinking about putting the ball in. I've always been like that I think is like the best example in my own personal life of even in my own head of like, okay, I need to put this ball in. But if I'm thinking just about putting the ball in and not thinking about something tactical, I
Mm.
lose sight of it and I miss and then I miss like an easy float or like so what do you think is how would you speak to a team that's having that issue?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that um like I go back to like what Hugh was, and we had a lot more jump servers at that point. So it was me and Logan were jump serving. So we had a green light regardless. It was
So
like, hey,
nice.
you're jump serving, green light. Like if you miss, whatever. But like if you're float serving, like you got to keep 9 out of 10. Like it is like a super, super high standard. And so even now, like our practices are very much, 9 out of 10. Like we're trying to be really low error. So we're training in that sense. So it should like translate in a match. But I think as a coach, at least what I'm learning is like coaching forward. Like we can't talk about what happened in the past. All we can do is like,
Mm,
hey, this person's struggling like on her right side. We got to get in the 2 or 3 seam, whatever it is, And so talking, like you said, tactically about it, but like also recognizing like, hey guys, like they're struggling to side out. Like we just got to put it on them. Like it doesn't matter how hard right now. We gotta put it on them. And so, but again, in navigating that conversation, I'm really not sure, but
I'm so excited to see how you grow as a coach. I think it'll be so cool because I don't know, I just think about like the reality, at least from what I've seen is like the obvious. You see teams every and maybe you have this as well, but every year I've ever played, like in Poland last year, um, there was one team that like on paper didn't have the best guys, but they were just like they played so good as a team, you know? But I feel like especially definitely more so overseas and much less in the university, it's like guys are playing for like girls are playing for contracts. You're playing to get a better contract and get paid more. You want to win, of course. You want to compete. You love your teammates most likely. That's the best part. We get to build such authentic and amazing relationships. But like it's for yourself. You're going at
Yeah.
home and you're not looking at team stats. You're like, how did I do?
Yep.
I have always felt like that's got to be the hardest job as a coach, especially at that level of like getting your team to buy into like, yo, this is what we got to do to better the team. And in fact, it ends up bettering everyone. But I think it's such a hard message for athletes to like really understand, especially when they're playing bad. Like, have you ever experienced that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, like you said, like at the level of, professional, it's like, how do you manage the team and how do you get everybody to play cohesive? And it's so tough. Yeah, I don't know. I always, in general, right? Like you said, we all wanted contracts. We all wanted to like make sure that we were, secure for the next season or whatever. But I always wanted our team to win. And if I felt like I played well and the team won, like that's a win, right? Like,
Mm.
but also at the end of the day, it's like you can only control what you can, and that's your actions. And if you can show up every day and be good, like then maybe that's gonna help others as well in that area. So, but that is tough.
Do you ever felt like you've had your role has changed from team to team, or do you feel like you're at the point where it's like people know what to expect from you and you know what to expect from yourself and you bring the same thing every time? Or do you feel like it kind of grooves a little bit and twists a little bit based on the team you're on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of I think that like people know and know what to expect, and like I can kind of consistently do that. I do think like the weight of that or like the relationship of that is much different. So for example, like sometimes I have maybe more of a passing role than maybe more of an offensive role, where
Mm,
sometimes in other years, more offensive role and like less not less passing, because I feel like I always try to take a little bit more area, but like there's been times
because
where
you
I'm like
drop straight up dimes.
yeah, there's just a time where I have to take a little more court because maybe the outside next to me isn't like the most, or they're just trying to hit too, so it's trying to find that balance. And then also like you got to be flexible too, right? Like you're going into a system of what the coach wants, right? So you're trying to adapt to that most,
Mm,
but then it's like you still have to be authentic to who you are. And I think that's where it comes, like reading. I was doing a clinic this last week. It's like being able to read the game wherever you are, because you're probably not going to understand half the time what the heck is happening because
mm,
they're speaking another language. But if you can see the right things and you can make the right move, people are going to want to hire you. But if you're like, you're needing a coach to tell you, hey, stand here and dig this ball, like odds are you're not going to last long
mm.
because like you can't sustain that over time.
For some girls listening who are like, yeah, I want to get better, but I'm not in an environment that either I can play a ton or whatever. Like, what resources would you offer to them, or like, what's out there? Like, how can girls get better who maybe don't have the physical opportunity to play volleyball a ton?
Yeah. I don't know how you did growing up, but I did like speed and agility classes. Like, how can I get faster? How can I jump higher? I think playing other sports too, like you got to give your mind a break a little
Mm,
bit, and like learning like how your body moves in relation to other things, and learning body awareness and coordination, like that all plays a role into like the sport of volleyball as well. And then I just think like watching a ton of volleyball, like if you're into it, like Volleymetrics is awesome. Volley Station, there's a lot of avenues to be able to watch it.
VNL
Yeah,
highlights on YouTube, I think, also.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, and there's tons of live matches now, and obviously leading up to world championships and then the college game as well. So I think there's all these opportunities to watch, and even just watching, like oftentimes you're seeing the action performed the right way. So seeing that over time is always good. So yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, I'm gonna let you go here in a second. I do want to. I had a couple people write in questions, so I want to like ask a
Yeah.
couple just from
All
fans.
right.
Wait, but quickly though, if I had to sum up just who you are, you're just like such a like a good role model for sports in general, you know. And the only thing I can think of is like it's too good to be true. It's just too good to
Which
be
is
true,
sometimes
dude.
you never know. You
You're
never
saying all
know.
the right things, dude. It's too good to be true. So like
Yeah.
share with me, like, do you have advice? Like, do you play with the dark arts? Like, what goes on in their life? Like, I don't know. Are there ever times where, and it doesn't have to be anything that's like illegal or crazy or anything, but just
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
what's your advice, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I like to have a few drinks, spicy margaritas every now and then. I mean,
Oh, spicy margarita.
yeah, I mean, in general, like I lost my mom like early. I lost her like it's almost 11 years now. And then
Oh.
obviously having to go through a pretty hard relationship before, like just there's some trauma there as far as things that I've had to go through like during my volleyball career that haven't been
Mm,
easy, but have kind of made me who I am today, but definitely has created like, some trust things or like being able to be open and vulnerable. You know, it, it's a challenge. And I think as you get older, it's harder to make friends, right?
mm,
Like, you're very much into what you're into and then like trying to relate to others. I think there's those inner challenges of like, and then moving to a new city. And like, there's just
yeah.
all these different things that play into it. And then we're like all over the place. So then
Yeah.
keeping in touch with people is hard. And like all my
Were you
friends have
able to
kids.
maintain like those relationships? Like, do you still have like best friends from high school or college or anything?
Not as many from high school and from college, yes, but I wouldn't say I have a ton of friends. Like I have a few like really good friends and like they're like been there through thick and thin, but
Mm,
it's still hard and it's hard to maintain. And then obviously like I'm sure you too, like you're changing, you're evolving, right? Because you're seeing how all the whole world is living, right? And that perspective in itself is like, I don't know, every time I come back to the States, I'm like, oh my gosh, like we live in like such an amazing place. Like there's so much to be thankful for, but it
yeah.
doesn't leave you jaded in like some areas where it's like, man, like, the people I've met overseas or environments that I've seen, like it's tough to see at times, because it's
Mm.
just like I don't know.
Well, first of all, it's nice to see you transitioning into coaching because I'll tell you what, we don't have enough, in my opinion, like just high level quality coaches. And this is no, I think people think sometimes I'm like against, like I have some, there's no dogma, there's no nothing. I just love seeing someone who understands overseas high level play, international level play, and is just a good person. Like I'm so stoked for you. Which by the way, you mentioned like having a hard time finding friends. You're in Austin. That's like the place to meet
I
people, is
know.
it not?
It is. It's been great. And honestly, like yeah, we belong to the country club. So it's really been we played pickleball the other night, which was a lot of fun. And have you played pickleball?
Wow, dude, pickleball is hot right now.
It's so hot. It's
It's
so
hot.
fun though.
Is it? I've never played.
We were so bad though. I mean, it was very humbling. So we have a lot to learn, but
Sweet.
it was a great time. And yeah, like you said, there's a lot of opportunities, but like I've never really felt settled all that much, like
Yeah.
we're constantly going. So like to kind of settle down, like get to know our neighbor, like it's just a different vibe. So
Are you excited? I know you're like just, let's say, transitioning. You're just
yeah.
transitioning here.
Yep.
I'm just curious. Are you like excited to finally settle down? Is it weird? Like, what kind of emotions do you have? Like, kind of stepping back from volleyball being your number one priority right now, even
Yeah,
though
it's
I mean you're coaching, but
yeah. It's definitely different. It's just different. I wouldn't say it's weird. I'm excited. It's just a different space to navigate, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
I'm
You just
excited
never
for you. I mean, you're in Austin. Like, that's doesn't seem like the worst place to be coaching. You could be in
no,
like I don't know.
definitely not.
Well, also you were born and raised in Nebraska, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What was it like there?
Yeah, it's different. I mean, I grew up on a farm and then town, kind of both best of both worlds, and it's a different, slower life.
That's why you got farm girl strength.
Slower. Yeah.
It's all making sense now.
Exactly,
Did you grow
exactly.
up like with I don't know, like multiple family members and like on a farm, like actually?
Yeah, so my dad and my grandpa farmed. My family had like 300 acres that they farm, and so
Wow.
yeah, we worked like
What
on.
do they farm?
My dad he harvests corn, beans, and then some alfalfa, and then he had pigs at one time, and then he has like I think like 10 head of cattle now, like because he's by himself, so he's still trying to manage all of that by himself, which is
Wow.
pretty impressive. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I was in 4-H for like a short amount of time, and then I was
Mm,
like, "This, Dad, I'm sorry, this
no.
isn't my jam. No,
So
no,
your chores didn't consist of like milking goats and stuff?
no, definitely not. I would
Wow.
paint the barn in the summer, and then we had this thing, it was like a bean bar, which is like you're supposed to be spraying the beans, like you're supposed to be spraying the weeds in the beans, right? So you're sitting on the back of a tractor, and there's like rows where there's seats, and so it'd be me and like my three cousins, and like instead of spraying the weeds, we were spraying each other with like chemicals. But it was like, oh my
Wow.
god, this is so fun. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah, that's
No.
what I did in the summer. My dad paid us great, and it was a good time, but
Dude,
not
that's
my
sweet.
cup of tea.
I'm
Yeah.
just well, that's interesting to hear. I'm just always envious because I'm like such a suburb kid, you know. So like I grew up like a mile away from like my kindergarten up until high school, basically, just like classic, just like tiny little boxes, all the same, bunch of kids. So I think
Yep.
I'm always like, oh, I'm like, oh man, that's so cool that you grew up like in a farm, and obviously you feel differently about it, especially as a child. But I think it's cool that you got to be exposed to like, I don't know. First of all, I can imagine your dad's like such a hardworking guy if he was able to have a farm like that, and I'm sure that that was passed on to you. It's clearly is. So
Sure.
there's
Yeah. No.
something
And
about people, volleyball players specifically, that come from that farm life. I'm starting to realize Kelsey kind of
yeah.
had a similar thing. There's something going on, and you know what? I'm gonna
Yep.
get to the bottom of it.
For sure. For sure.
All right, I'm gonna ask a couple questions. I haven't really reviewed them. I just figured hopefully there'd be like a couple of fun ones on here. But
Absolutely. Let's roll. I'm at 10% on my computer, so
okay,
you're not
just a
that
couple
much.
then.
Yeah. No worries.
Let's see. What's your nutrition like?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely evolved over the years. I think that when I was in college and really early on the national team, I was kind of like, well, I can eat whatever I want and I'm gonna be fine. And it definitely hit me that I'm like, to be optimal performer, like being able to understand how your body works. And I think everybody's different, right? Like more people need more carbohydrates, more people, they're sweating more, so they need to hydrate more differently. So I think it's just really fully understanding what your body needs and like being able to I was always scared of the nutritionist because I'm like, oh, she's judging me or whatever, but they're
Hmm.
there to help. They're there to help and guide you. And I was always worried that if I got too lean, then I was going to be injury prone, and then if I pushed too hard in the weight room, then I was going to have more injuries on the court. Like I was just so worried about performing on the court that kind of everything else went to the wayside, where I learned that I needed these other things to be really, really good
Yeah.
here. So it's just kind of understanding that. And I think everybody's different. So
Soda pop? You drink soda pop?
I did, but now I don't. Now it's like a sparkling water. And I'll have a soda every now and then.
Waterloo, baby. Waterloo,
Let's
LaCroix. I
go.
feel you.
Yeah.
So in
But I
college, were you like in college? Were you eating bad in college?
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Eating whatever I wanted. Oh, even on the national team, like my first like 4 years, it was like my roommate was Faluca, and it was like a Krispy Kreme Sunday. Like that's, you went and got a whole box of Krispy Kremes. That's just what you did. That's what we
Did
did.
did you have a moment where you were like, I think my body's changing? Because I started experiencing that where I'm like, because we train so much, we can kind of eat whatever we want. Now, granted, I'm not just saying this for those children that are listening, okay? Like there's clear benefits to starting to eat, like let's call it a whole foods diet. Like you definitely like sleeping good and eating good is like an absolute magic trick.
For sure.
But there you do get to a point where you feel like I can do whatever I want because we're burning so many calories.
Exactly. But I just felt, and I don't know, like the joint pain, like if I
Yes.
was eating super high sugars, like the next day in the gym, I was like, oh my gosh, my body feels like trash. And so it was like, then when I finally started like changing some things and like moderating some things, like I was like, oh, like I don't have to feel like that. And I am sleeping better. And yeah, but again, I think it's a little bit of an experiment at times, because it's just like you don't actually know.
Don't wait until you're too old, man. Don't wait.
Amen.
Yes. Okay, last question. Actually, by the same person. So, guess what? I'm answering both these questions because I really love this next one. Where does Jordan buy shoes and clothes? The rest of us tall gals need help.
Oh, not the fashionista. I'm probably the
First of
wrong
all,
person to ask.
how tall are you?
I'm only 6'2".
6'2". That's tall.
Yeah.
That's tall.
I know like for like dress clothes, like I go to like Banana Republic, for tall things like that. But again, I'm not dressing up that much. I know a lot of girls love ASOS. I don't really shop there as much. I've been able to find like jeans at like the buckles. The buckle is such a Midwest thing.
The buckle.
uh,
Wow, the most Midwest thing.
most Midwest thing ever to say. And oh, actually, Madewell. Madewell actually really does a good job with like long jeans as well. And then, Lulu, it's such an investment. It's like, and it's, I
Mm.
have had Lulus for like the last like 10 to 15 years, and like they're just so sturdy.
And they're on it for tall
It's
girls.
for tall, yeah, tall girls as well. And then obviously I have my sponsor, Nike.
Let's go. Okay. First of all, that's basically the last question. I want to hear a little from you. First of all, wait, are you sponsored by Jordan?
No, well, Nike. So Nike, yeah.
Yeah, sick.
Yeah.
And does that maintain while you're coaching?
Yeah, I signed through 2024.
Let's go.
I know.
I
It's
hope
nice.
they're gonna. I mean, you can still. Is Texas? Is there a sponsorship? Nike? How does
Yep.
that work? Oh, then
Yep.
that's perfect.
Perfect. Yep.
Oh, that's great. When did you get sponsored? Like right out of college?
Yes, with Mizuno, I was right out of college. And then I was with Mizuno all the way to 2012. Yep,
I feel
through
like not
2012.
not enough athletes take advantage of the opportunities for scholarship. Like someone like you, who's just a baller, like you played at Olympics, like
Yep.
those opportunities are going to come. I can't imagine that you reached out for them. Maybe you did.
Yep.
But like, I just feel like there's not enough. It's like with social media, with all these things, like there's so much opportunity out there. And like
Yep.
no one's taking advantage in the volleyball world, I feel like, of those
For sure.
opportunities.
For sure. I agree. And I think they're, like you said, like on social media, there, I don't know if you have brands every now and then that reach out. It's like, hey, yeah, like trying to get your name out there is awesome. And yeah, no, I've been very lucky that I've worked with Mizuno, Adidas, and Nike now, and all have been great and awesome. And yeah, it's been fun to kind of navigate that space too. But you have to be like your own like agent necessarily,
Mm.
because again, they're not such high contracts or things like that, but it's just a wonderful opportunity to get gear. And, I haven't had to buy volleyball shoes my entire career. So that's been nice. And
Hey, yeah,
yeah,
for sure,
you can't take that for granted because some people don't have that chance. So
for
it's,
sure.
and again, I think that goes into all these things of like, well, what can I control? And if I can be consistently this, then things will kind of fall into place a little bit. So
You know what, Jordan Larson, just an absolute citizen, just a
yeah.
good citizen. I love it, dude. Thank you
No,
so. I really, really appreciate you hopping on
this
here
is
for the first one in a
awesome.
while. Love getting to know you a little more. We're like, let's say, friends in passing. I feel like I saw you
Absolutely.
a bunch. I really appreciate you taking some time. I think people are going to be stoked. This was super helpful.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And
Yeah.
I look forward to listening to him more. So
Yes, and good luck on your journey. I'm so stoked to see how you end up
thank you.
coaching, newly married. Like, I'm really excited to see where you go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for hopping on. Oh,
Yeah.
last thing. If
Yep.
you want to plug yourself in any way, I can imagine you must be writing a book, like or something. Something's got to
Ah,
be in the works.
there has been some talks for sure. So we'll see what happens. And
Jordan
yeah,
Larson, A Good Citizen. That's the book.
that's the title. I like it. I mean, yeah, I love it. So we'll see. Yeah, haven't really had time to think about it, honestly. It's still been lots going on.
Okay,
So
you don't need no spoilers. That's fine. But if you want to plug anything, like now is your time. If like where can people follow you or see like how you're doing and still follow along in your journey?
yeah, I think on Twitter, Jordan Larson 10, Instagram, Gov 1007 random.
Not
Yeah,
random. I know I'm the governor. I know people, someone
yeah.
I guess calls you the governor. Like, is that
And then I just like stupidly answered, and now it's just like I changed my Instagram handle as like a joke, and now I like can't change it back because like now contact Instagram, and I'm like, well, shit. So
sticking
yeah,
with the governor?
exactly. So it's part of the brand, but
Love it.
it's fun and it's always gonna be a good memory. But yeah, and then I have Facebook. Do you have Facebook? I still have Facebook. I
Wow.
know
Good for you.
that really makes me feel really ancient apparently. And
No, find
I
Jordan Larson on Facebook.
yeah.
Please
I
friend
have
her on
TikTok as well,
Facebook.
but I never post. But I have
Sick. I know
TikTok.
it's hard. I'm trying to jump on the TikTok train because I think it's good to put yourself out there and that type of thing. It's so hard for me. It's hard for me. It's hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we're trying.
Well, thank you. This was awesome. I
Thank you.
appreciate
Sweet. I
it.
really do appreciate it. Tell the man I said what's up
Will
and
do.
thank you so much. Thank you guys.